next speaker then. Dr. Peter Larson is on the Board of Directors for the National Council on Canada-Air Relations. He is also a board member of the National Capital Chapter of Canadian International Council and serves as the chair of its Middle East Study Group. Dr. Larson graduated in economics from the University of Western Ontario in 1968, and he also holds a Bachelor of Education from the University of Regina and attained a PhD in political economy from the University de Grenoble in France. So without further ado, please help me in welcoming Dr. Peter Larson.
Salam alaikum. I'm lucky that I don't have to compete with the storm. I'm pretty impressed at storms, so I'm sorry for Carolyn. We start off actually by congratulating Joseph and Sukaina. Am I saying that right, Sukaina? Yes, more or less. Thank you. For organizing this big event tonight. You got a lot of people in the room, a lot of happy people, and I think you'll have a lot of fun. So congratulations to Joseph. I think it's extremely important for young people to get involved in helping shape Canadian society. We do, irrespective of where they come from, whether they're born here or not, whether their language, religion. So I think it's terrific to get young people interested in wanting to contribute to society, and I congratulate you all for that, and I congratulate the organizers. I think that the fact that all of you have decided to spend a Friday night here instead of doing something more fun outdoors, though actually not outdoors, not so much fun at the moment. I think it's great. I assume that you're here in part because there are some things about Canadian society that you'd like to improve. I assume that's the case. That you somehow want to make an improvement in Canadian society. And that makes me very happy. It makes me happy because I see that you, as youth of Middle East origin, want to contribute. It means that you care about Canada. You feel Canadian. You feel that you have the right, in fact, just as much right as I have, to criticize and to comment and to make suggestions and change the country. And in fact, most of you are going to live in Canada for many more years than I will. I'm 66. I've got a lot more years ahead of you in Canada. And so you have a right to try to change it and make it a place that suits you. You want to become critical of Canada. It's your right to do so. And so in my mind, that means that you've become real Canadian. People who were born in Canada. Born in Canada. So many of you who are born in Canada will feel probably somewhat different than your parents. Your parents will, in general, have been happy to get here. They'll have come from some other place and are grateful to be in Canada. For those of you who are born in Canada feel it's your right, and it is your right, to say, we want to change the place. We want to make some improvements. Now, I may not agree with all the improvements you want to make, and that's fine. That's what Canada is all about, as we discuss what changes you want to make. So, based on that assumption, on the assumption that you want to change some things about Canada, I have 4 suggestions for you. Now, you may not agree with all 4 suggestions, and that's perfectly fine, but I was asked to make them, and so that's why I'm making them. The first thing is, if there are things in Canada that you don't like, I suggest you start off by trying to understand why they are the way they are now. There are lots of things in Canada you might think are stupid. You might think, why do we dig up all this oil in the oil sands and pollute to the environment? You might say, it's stupid. Why don't we allow more, make it easier for immigrants to come in Canada? You might say, why do we charge tuition fees for university? Or why don't we allow the Sharia law to apply in Canada? Or why is the Queen of England our head of state? A lot of things you might say, why is it stupid? Well, these are just some examples, and I think you probably will have your own examples of things you don't agree with. But if we have laws or regulations or practices in Canada today, they are the result of many years of struggle of people that have gone before you. At least 150 years of struggle. Canada today is a country of 33 million people or so, all with different ideas. And the practices and the laws and the regulations we have come about as a result of struggle, over conversation, over discussion, over strikes, over demonstrations, and so on and so forth. So let's just take the example of bilingualism in the public service, or bilingualism generally. Why are French and English official languages in Canada? Why aren't, for example, why isn't Arabic or Mandarin? Why isn't Mandarin an official language? There's lots of Mandarin-speaking people living in Canada. And the answer lies in the compromises of history and the struggles that have gone before. Every English Canadian I know, and probably all of you, want Quebec to remain part of Canada, right? We want to remain a 90 Canada. But there are 6 million French-speaking Quebecers. They say one of the conditions on which they're going to be happy in Canada is that they can deal with their federal government in their language. That's one of their conditions. Now, of course, we can ignore Quebecers. That Canada did ignore them for a long time. But if you ignore them, you run the risk of social unrest, you run the risk of having 6 million people unhappy, and you even run the risk of the country dividing into two. So we came to a compromise. And the compromise we came to, as part of the compromise, is that Canada is a bilingual country. So if you are French-speaking from Quebec and you get arrested in Vancouver, you have the right in the federal court to have a trial in your language. If you're an English-speaking Canadian and if you live in Chicoutimi, you have the right to file your taxes in French. That's the compromise that we've made. Another part of the compromise is that Canada is multicultural. And Caroline referred to multiculturalism. We make certain accommodation for immigrant groups. We try to help them. They get subsidies to try to help them preserve their language. So Canada is today bilingual and multicultural. Now, this costs us a lot of money. But overall, Canadians think this is fair and it's worth it. So we do it. Not every Canadian agrees. Let's say you want to change it and you have the right to change it. Let's say you think that the only language in Canada should be English. You have the right to have that point of view. But you should study carefully how it is we got to where we are today before you start pushing on a proposal to change it. That's my first recommendation. My second recommendation is that you can't make change from the sidelines. You've got to be involved. What do I mean by this? I mean that no matter how many university courses you've taken or you do take, how many textbooks you read, you can never really come close to the actual process of making change until you get involved. In fact, I go so far as to say the only way you even understand Canada is to get involved in trying to change it. And then you'll understand things. Let's say you've read a book, you read 2 books, you've taken a university course about Canadian parliamentary democracy, you've learned about how members of parliament get elected, how the Prime Minister chooses his cabinet, how public service is independent, and so on and so forth. Are you in a position to make changes, make recommendations for change? Maybe. But I suggest that you go, before you go a little farther, you actually try to get involved in the election process. Go and volunteer for one of the candidates. Doesn't matter whether it's the Liberal Party or the Conservative Party or the Green Party. Go and volunteer for a candidate. Join the campaign. Now, first of all, what you're going to find out is no matter what they've written in their books about how open they are to immigrants, you'll see how open they are to you. You'll learn something about whether or not what they practice is what they preach. And I also guarantee if you go knocking door to door, as I have a couple of times in the past, try to talk to people about your candidate, you'll learn things about Canada that you never imagined. You'll get to peer into people's houses. You'll meet people who hate immigrants. You'll meet people who think that everybody in Quebec should speak French because we beat them in 1763. You'll meet people who think that all politicians are crooks. You'll meet people who know all kinds of things about Canada, and you know people who won't know very much about Canada at all. And you'll come to have a much greater understanding of the challenges facing the political parties, the challenges facing candidates, and you also have a better idea of what you need to do in order to get political political parties and candidates to take up the issues that are important to you. If you don't want to get involved in electoral politics, you can do something else. You can go into an organization. Take, for example, the Middle East Youth Organization. Try to get on the executive of the Middle East Youth Organization, for example. I'm pretty sure you'll quickly find two things. One, it's pretty easy to get on the executive because most volunteer organizations I know are desperate for people to join. That's number one. And secondly, you'll find when you get on the executive, it's a lot harder to get people to agree to your ideas than you think, because all the other people on the executive have their own ideas. So that's where you find out more about the Middle East Youth Organization is by getting involved. So I say, if you want to change things, get involved. The third thing I want to say is that organizations like this one, which are based on race or ethnicity or religion, are not, in my view, very effective ways to conduct change in Canada. Let me be clear, I do think organizations like this one are very useful, very legitimate, a very worthwhile organization. If you want to have a Kurdish organization or a Muslim Canadian organization or whatever, that is entirely appropriate, particularly for preserving language or culture or for helping that community integrate into Canada and deal with services as they need. But they're not very effective levers, in my mind, for affecting change in Canada. And they're actually very little use, in my mind, when it comes to affecting Canadian foreign policy. Let me give an example. And what is the reason for this? Well, I think that mainstream Canadians, you notice I'm against anybody, mainstream Canadians, because if you're talking about people who are not of a specific ethnic group, we're all from some ethnic group, but in general, mainstream Canadians have a huge fear with respect to immigrant groups, and even particularly with respect to youth groups in the Middle East. And what is that fear? Well, the fear is that you are going to somehow bring the conflicts, the problems, the fights that happen over there into Canada. Mainstream people are very worried about that. Now, I know Canadians are very fair people generally, but they often don't know very much about what's going on around the world. So, as a result, they know that a lot of bad things go on, that there's massacres, there's rapes, there's genocide, there's suppression of human rights in all kinds of countries, and there's ethnic conflict. But they actually don't know who's right and who's wrong, for example, between the Israelis and the Palestinians. They don't know who's right between the Kurds and the Turks. They don't know who's right between the Tamils and the Sri Lankans. They don't know and can't know who's right between the Indian Sikhs and the Hindus, for example. Because they don't know, they don't want to pick sides. They want to stay away from it. They're worried that those troubles will be important to Canada. And this is not just racism. This is not just intolerance. It's not irrational fear. Most of you are too young to remember this, but in 1985, ethnic problems led to the blowing up of an airplane. It was a fight between ethnic Hindus and Sikhs in India, and 322 Canadians died when a bomb went off on the plane. So Canadians are afraid that fights and hostilities from over there are going to somehow be important to Canada. I'll give another example that's much more minor, but I think it says the same thing. Last week I was at a demonstration downtown on Elgin Street, organized by a Palestinian organization to mark the Nakba. Do you know what the Nakba is? Do you know what the Nakba is? Yeah. No? Yes? Anybody not know? The Nakba was the date, it's the disaster, it's the date in which 750,000 Palestinians had to flee Palestine with the creation of the State of Israel. So they were there at this demonstration for Nakba Day, and I went because I was invited to as the Vice President of the Canadian National Council on Canada Relations. And I feel a lot of sympathy for the Palestinians, and I'm incensed over the fact that our government has a completely one-sided and non-even-handed policy. I feel as a Canadian, it's incensed me that we've taken a one-sided approach to this. So I was there, but a big demonstration with lots of Palestinian flags may make Palestinian Canadians feel good. But what I observed when I was there is that most mainstream Canadians who were walking by would cross the street and go over on the other side. When they see a big group of foreign-looking people carrying some foreign flags, they don't really know very much about it, and they keep away from it. So my conclusion is that It may be good for making people feel good, but it's not a very effective lever for changing Canadian public opinion on that issue. So, in my view, if you want to change Canadian policy on those kinds of issues, for human rights in Palestine or Bahrain or for Muslims generally, you're much better off to join an existing Canadian organization that already works in this area, whether it's Amnesty or Human Rights Watch or whatever. Now, getting a mainstream organization to adopt your cause, let's say talk about Bahrain, I was talking about Bahrain earlier just a minute. Getting a mainstream organization to adopt that cause takes more work because you've got to explain it to them. And also they have a lot of other causes they're working on. But in the end, I think that's going to be much more effective. My fourth and final point, you'll be glad to know I'm near the end. My fourth and final point is that I don't think we should ever forget that Canada is a democracy. The only way to change things in Canada is to convince other people that the idea that you have is fairer or juster or better. Let's give an example of those Quebec students. Everybody know they've had big strikes in Quebec about tuition fees. There have been quite big demonstrations in Quebec. The students in Quebec have been carrying on a struggle against the Jean Charest government for now more than 3 months. At least they think they're struggling against the Quebec government. They're not really struggling against the Quebec government. They're really carrying on a political conversation with Quebec society. Quebec is a democracy. The Charest government knows that it's got to go to the elections in less than a year. It has to keep an eye on public opinion polls. So if the students can convince the majority of the population they're right, they'll win. And if the government convinces the majority of the population that they're right, the students will lose. So far, the students have been quite effective in making their case. They've tried to show how the lower tuition fees benefit not only students, but the whole Quebec society. And polls showed that the Quebec students were doing okay. Then came the smoke bombs in the metro about a week ago. Public opinion turned against the students, right, if they had gone the wrong way. Then the government seized on that to introduce a new law, which now many Quebecers think went too far. So the public opinion goes with the government, and they're coming back with the government. But it's an exercise in Canadian democracy. So the students will win or lose, depending on how well they're able to convince other people. So of course, I'm not so naive to think that Canada is a perfect democracy. It isn't. Some voices count more than others, and you know that. But Canada is about as close to a democracy as any country in the world today. And we should take advantage of that to make changes. So in conclusion, I'm really happy that you want to get involved. I'm happy that you want to make changes in Canada. To me, it's a sign of your maturity, and it's a sign that you care about Canada as much as I or we do. And if you want to bring changes in Canada, remember the 4 suggestions. Number 1, take time to study why it is that we are the way we are already. There's lots of struggle before you were born, or lots of struggle before you got here. So there are reasons why we are as we are. Get involved. You can't change the world through Facebook or Twitter. You've got to join an association, a political party, a movement. And through that, if you have a good idea, you have to promote it there. Get involved in mainstream organizations. Find ways to meet and do things with mainstream Canadians. That's how you will be able to advance your issues in Canadian. Get involved, for example, with Amnesty International or OPERD or the University Students' Council or one of the political parties. And finally, remember that Canada is a democracy. You may have some very good ideas. If other people don't agree with you, it doesn't mean they're stupid. It doesn't mean they're corrupt. It doesn't mean they're evil. In fact, some of their ideas may actually even be better than yours. But you've got to convince them that your ideas are good. And if you can, if you have the need to discuss, you come to a compromise. So my final word is, Canada is yours just as much as it is mine. So go ahead and try to make it better.